شكرا جزيلا لضيفتنا.
Thank you, our guest Rawa, for this session that is inspiring. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite you to attend the fifth session under the title of
Session titled Identifying and Executing Your First AI Project, delivered by Donald Farmer, Principal of Treehive Strategy. Mr. Donald, the stage is yours. We would like to welcome Mr. Donald Farmer, Principal of Treehive Strategy. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here again. So I am talking about how to identify and execute your first AI project. How many of you have already built an AI project? Okay, so you can go get some coffee, and because you've already done your first project. This is for the rest of you who have not yet done one. In my work, a lot of the time, I'm talking to people who they really want to use AI. They have been playing with it, perhaps. They've been trying it out. They've been trying some of these great apps that you've seen. And now they're thinking, how do I actually use this in my work? And they don't know what their first project is going to be. So they get quite excited about that. Somebody's phone is ringing here, I think. They get quite excited about their first project, but they're worried about how they get started. So this is my job today, is to help you get started with your very first project. So there are three basic things I want to tell you about this. And the first and most important is that you must start thinking about the business application rather than the technology application. AI is very exciting technology, but running a project just for the technology itself is not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to give you any value. It's not going to move your business forward. It's not going to move your organization forward. It's just playing with technology, and we can all do that. So the first thing is focus on the value that you're going to achieve. If you're in business, as opposed to, say, in a government organization or something like that, then you need to focus on money. How much money would you save if you run this project? And if it's not going to save you any money, it's not going to make you any money, then that's not a good first project. You should start thinking about the value straight away. And avoid thinking about the technology for its own sake. There will be people in your organization, there will be developers and data scientists who are very excited about the technology. Let them be excited. You should be excited about the impact on your business and on your organization. The second thing I'd really like you to do is to engage with people. Something we have heard in almost every session where we have talked about AI is people being afraid of the future. People being worried about their jobs. What is AI going to do to my job? Who is AI going to affect? Who's going to find that their job has disappeared in the future? Whenever you build an AI project in a business or in any organization, people start to get worried about that. Because just as they see it being exciting, also they are concerned about what's going to happen. So two things you can do here to make that work. The first is, of course, you need to collaborate with people. You need to work across different parts of the organization in order to find out what the real impacts of AI will be beyond the immediate concern of the business. The second thing you can do is incorporate perspectives from everyone who's involved in the project. Now, to do that, let's say you're working in a call center and you're going to automate answering calls in the call center. Who would you talk to? Well, you might talk to the designers, you might talk to the call center managers, you might talk to the customers. These are all good people to talk to. But you also need to talk to the operators, to the people whose jobs are just about to be automated, and find out what they think. and find out what they think is valuable. And you will learn many things that you didn't expect. You'll find all sorts of things about how they do their job that is new and different and which you didn't take account of. It's the same way as if you're building a self-driving car. A self-driving car is a great thing. I've been in a self-driving car several times. They're quite common now in San Francisco. You can get in a self-driving taxi and it'll drive you around. And you know the two things that don't happen in a self-driving car? Number one thing is you never have a conversation with the driver. You never talk to them. And it turns out that drivers actually quite like having conversations with people. And I quite like having conversations with the driver. Now, if I was designing a self-driving car and all I was concerned about was speed and safety and efficiency, I would lose that human element because I wouldn't be talking about the driver. And it turns out I quite like talking to the driver. But the other thing that happens in the self-driving car is that it doesn't crash because it's really safe. Self-driving cars are actually very efficient and safe. So there's an advantage. The automation is a great thing, but there's a disadvantage that I lose the human element. So maybe what I want in the future is a self-driving car which has got the automation to keep it safe, but still has a human driver who can then do other things. They can have a conversation with me about where they come from and where they're going on vacation and their children and all the other things. But they can also help me with my bag. If you get it to the airport and you've got a self-driving car, who helps you with your bag? And it turns out that's an important thing as well. So there's a human element, and you would not discover that unless you spoke to everyone involved. So you need to speak to the driver, and you need to speak to the passengers, you need to speak to customers, you need to speak to all the people who are doing the automation. So you need to incorporate everybody in the conversation. And then the third thing that you can do is to use an AI-oriented methodology. That is to say, if you're building an AI project, you can't use the same methods and techniques as you used for a standard IT project. You have to use a methodology that is appropriate for AI. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk to you about today, which is how to run a discovery accelerator for an AI project. There are 3 parts to a discovery accelerator. And I've run many of these now. I think I've done about 20 of these with different companies. And I know this process works pretty well. The first thing you can do is identify existing processes in your business where AI will help. And I've got some examples of that for you. And then you need to find the right techniques to map to the pain points that you've identified. Now, notice it's this way around. I don't have an AI technique, and then I go looking for a problem. I start by identifying where are the processes where AI can help, and now I choose an AI technique. I'll talk later on about how projects fail, but one of the first points of failure is because people have a favorite AI technique they want to use, and they're going to apply that no matter where, if it's appropriate or not. So map the techniques to the pain point. And then I'm going to suggest that you apply what I call a taster framework. Taster's a strange word, but sometimes if you have a selection of cheese, you call that a taster. I'll have a little taste of every one. And I call this a taster framework. It's a way of trying out something to see if it's going to work, and I'll give you an example of what a taster framework looks like. So to run the accelerator, identify the processes, map AI techniques to the pain points, and then apply the taster framework. Now, something that's actually quite interesting is people say to me, how do I know what techniques to use? How do I know that I've got a problem that AI can help with? Well, you can automate repetition. Anything that is repetitive and boring. If you look at the Tesla robot outside, there's a Tesla car and a Tesla robot beside it, and it actually says on the label there, it is designed to automate boring tasks, things that human beings get fed up doing. So focus on tasks that are manual, that are repetitive, or which are error-prone. Now, one of the reasons you want to do it if it's repetitive is because AI learns from data. And if a process is repetitive, then it generates a lot of data. So you have a lot of examples that you can use to train the AI on. The other thing that you can look at is examples where you can make errors and where AI can help you. So for example, data entry, entering data manually, or doing data cataloging, or doing simple client inquiries that just need a simple answer. All of those things can be automated fairly easily. So that's one example where a process can help. Another thing you might want to look at is resource constraints, where you're finding it difficult to complete projects because you don't have the people or you don't have the resources to do it. And AI can help there because AI is like having another team member. One of the most effective ways of using AI, in fact, is to think of it as another team member, a team member who doesn't get tired, who doesn't need to take time off, and who is there all the time to help you. And so things like smart documentation and automated workflows really work well there. And I'm going to show you an example of smart documentation. And a third way that AI can help is by giving you new insight. You can find areas where you can enhance your product or enhance your service by making it more insightful. And so, for example, you can add predictive analytics to predict the future. You can look for anomalies. If you're on an e-commerce site, then already today you're seeing recommendation engines. Customers who bought this also bought that. People who watched this movie also watched that movie. There are many of those processes in business where you can look for predictions, you can find outliers, or you can create recommendations for the future, for future action. So all of these work together pretty well. In any business, there are three things you can do. And I honestly mean in any business. Every single business I know and every single organization I know, and actually I'm just about to say every single person I know, can benefit from these three things. And the first one is time series analysis. That is data which changes over time. Anything where you're recording data every day, you can go back and look at that pattern and see how it changes over time. Every business has invoices and sales. Every organization has records that it keeps on a daily basis, or an hourly basis, or a monthly basis, but you still have that data changing over time. Every person has data that changes over time. It might be your sleep patterns, it might be your diet, it might be something like that. They were talking about a diet plan earlier. You know, you could track your diet over time. Anything that changes over time, you can do analysis of it and get more value from it, and it's easy to do. You can look for anomalies, outliers, exceptions, something that looks wrong. Now that can be really difficult to do. Sometimes it's simple because a number is just so obviously wrong that you look at it and say, well, that's not right. But sometimes it can be more subtle, more difficult to identify, and AI can learn the patterns and say, yeah, we identify that as a possible exception, and that's something you should look at. And every business that has data entry or is collecting data, I guarantee you, you've got some outliers. Another thing that any business can do is deal with natural language. We all have documents, and almost every organization I know in the world nowadays has manuals and procedures and codes of conduct. And one thing you can do is bring all that together and put that into an application, and you can build a chatbot. I was at a conference in the US, and I'm going to show you this example fairly soon. But somebody came to me in the break of the conference and said, I don't think AI can do anything for me because I run a gardening company. And I have 40 people who go out and they work in gardens. And they cut the grass and they cut the trees and they water the flowers and they do all that. And I don't think AI can help me. And I said, well, let's sit down over lunch and we'll see what we can do. And so we started talking about the different things that they had in process. And it turned out, by the way, that they had time series data. They have a lot of time series data about the work they do in the gardens. So we thought about that, and that seemed a bit technical. And then we looked at, well, what else do you have? And it turned out, of course, they have a lot of safety manuals. How do you use that electric saw? How do you use this machine? What do you do about these chemicals? And they had safety manuals for all of these things. And I said, well, how do people use the safety manuals? And they said, well, nobody does, really. Nobody looks at them. They're all trained, but nobody looks at the manuals. So what we did was we loaded the manuals into a chatbot, into ChatGPT, just regular ChatGPT, and now his staff can ask questions of the safety manual. And it turns out to be very, very powerful. And most of his gardeners, this guy is based in the US, most of his gardeners speak Spanish. And they can ask in Spanish. And they don't have to translate the safety manual. The bot will just answer in Spanish and give great answers. And there's some work we have to do, and when I show you the example, we'll go through that. But you have to make sure that the bot doesn't give inappropriate answers. And you have to make sure that the bot doesn't answer questions that it shouldn't be answering, because people will ask all sorts of things of bots. But once you've actually built this, it's a great facility. Now, I think every single one of you probably has a company manual, or an organization manual, or a code of conduct, or a code of ethics, or a code of practice. And you can load that in, and straight away, within minutes, you have a bot that can be used by anybody in your organization to answer questions. And that becomes very, very powerful. I created a bot for myself. There's a Donald bot out there. I do a lot of writing, and I write and publish probably about 20,000 words a year for an American website I write about data and I write about technology. And now I built a Donald bot. I loaded 100,000 words of my writing, and now I can ask myself questions. What would I think of this? What would I think of that? And so when I'm writing in the future, I can make sure that I'm consistent. And you can do this. You could find your favorite author, your favorite technical writer, the favorite academics in your field, load their work up into the chatbot, and create an interactive interface for your favorite subject. And you could do that in minutes. It's perfectly straightforward. So these are 3 quick wins that everyone in this room can use straight away. Time series, looking for outliers, and using natural language to create an interface. I want to show you some of this, so I've got some demos that will show this in action. And these are video demos, and I hope they run properly. Let's see. I'm going to try and talk you through them, but I think they're quite fun. Here's the first one. Here's some data. So this is time series data about school attendance. It's about students, the percentage of students who are attending school, who are absent, and who are absent without authorization. And I just loaded up into ChatGPT already, and I say, I want to analyze the school attendance over time. It shows me the data and immediately tells me what I'm about to see. It says, analyzing. It includes the date and the number of people who are present and absent and unauthorized. And would I like to analyze trends? You don't need to be a data scientist. It's already starting to analyze quite complex time series for you. And I said, yes, please show me school attendance, and now it draws me a chart. And I can see some things happening there in this visualization, and I start to ask it another question. I said, I'd like to focus on some more detail of this. And it tells me, first of all, that it can't find any outliers apart from one little outlier. So now I know the data is pretty good. And then I ask me another question. Would you like to inspect that? And I say, no thanks. I'm always very polite, by the way, with chatbots. I say please and thank you all the time. No thanks, but now I want to see the trends. And now it shows me the trends. And it shows me seasonal trends. Well, that's great. I say, please give me a deeper analysis, because I want to understand this phenomenon. And now it shows me the trend. It shows me a seasonal pattern, because it turns out that people are absent from school, and that varies over summer and winter. And then it also explains some random variability. That sounds technical, so now I ask it for a non-technical explanation, and it gives me a non-technical explanation that anyone could understand. So now I've done a time series analysis, and now I start to ask, well, what could cause this? And now it goes out and searches and says, well, it could be illness, it could be economic factors, it could be the fact that in the winter people are more likely to have cold and flu. And so now it gives me all that data, and I say, well, show me any patterns about illness. And so now it goes in and it analyzes, here's the seasonal pattern of illness, mapped against the data about seasonal illnesses like cold and flu and influenza and things, and shows me those peaks. And I say, please give me some more. And it starts to give me things I can do about that, and it starts to make recommendations of prevention. So what I've done here is started from just basic data that you all have, just time series data, and has really taken me into a detailed analysis. Now, I was going to say I'm not a data scientist, but actually I am a data scientist, so I probably could do this, but nothing I have shown you is out of the ordinary. Anyone could do this. I'm now asking it to make a prediction of what the next year will look like, and it gives me a forecast out of that. So I have gone from one file of data about school attendance. I've analyzed the seasonal patterns, I've analyzed the trends, I've made predictions, I've found outliers, I've found explanations for those outliers, and I've done all that without any detailed knowledge of the technology that's behind it, but it all makes sense to me because I can ask it to explain as well. This is very, very powerful. Every single one of you has time series data that you can take away and analyze today. Every one of you has time series data that you could do this analysis on. Might not be exactly the same, might not have quite the same interesting patterns, but every single person here has time series data and you can analyze it. Maybe it's sales, maybe it's invoices, maybe it's attendance, maybe it's employment, whatever it is that you're doing, you could do this analysis. So that's one example of something which all of us can do. The other demo I want to show you is the demo of the gardener and the manual that we loaded up. I'm going to load up a manual. It's a PDF manual from the gardening company. It's a safety manual, and then we're going to ask it some questions about safety. And some of them you will understand better than me. So here we are, Precision Landscape and Construction, the employee handbook. Everybody's got an employee handbook. And it's full of all sorts of things, and scroll through it. We create unique landscape for you. And I load it up into ChatGPT, very easy to do, and I've got 4 or 5 others there. And I ask it to create a customized GPT just for that manual, and I give it some instructions on how it should behave. And I tell it, for example, it should be friendly, concise, and professional. It should avoid questions that are giving unnecessary information, potentially offensive questions, inappropriate questions. It should look for anything which seems unsafe, and it should comply with the company policies. But now that I've got that and given it a little bit of training, I can now ask some questions. So I'm going to ask a question such as, what are the guidelines for working in extreme weather? And it now comes up and tells me, well, you need to be careful about potential hazards. You need to provide adequate water if the weather is too hot, and give frequent breaks in the shade so that people can take a rest. Or if it's cold, then you need to give them cold weather clothing. If the weather is extreme and there's lightning, then you shouldn't be working outside at all. And it gives me all of those. What about this? Does that make sense? If you're working in a garden and you find a snake, I think I would want to know. I don't know if this is good advice. Maybe it's good advice. I certainly don't want to find out if it's good advice. But I haven't done any translation. I just loaded up a manual from an American landscape company, and then I ask it a question, and it gives. I've been told it's a reasonable answer, but it's pretty interesting. That's extremely powerful. Every single one of you, I guess, has got a company manual. And you can just load in your company manual and build a bot that answers questions about how people should behave within your company. And that seems to me extremely powerful and something anyone could do. Now I want to talk about this taster process. And the taster process is actually very interesting from my point of view. I call it this taster because, well, it spells taster and it's kind of corny, but it's memorable. That's one thing. And the 6 things that a taster project should do, it should be thought-provoking, aligned, scoped, timely, evolutionary, and resourced. And I'll tell you a little bit about what each of these means. So the first thing is that it should be thought-provoking. Now, I said very early on that your first project should be focused on business value and not just on the technology. And that is absolutely true. Focus on business value, but don't focus on technology. Nevertheless, the project should be interesting. You don't want to do a boring project. Do one which stimulates people's excitement, gets them interested in the project. Should be innovative and creative if you can. And my key thing I would say is do something different. Don't just do something better. We can always do something better, but doing something different is more interesting. So a taster project should be thought-provoking. That's the first part of it. The second thing, however, and this is not a contradiction, but the second thing is that the project should be aligned. And by that I mean that it should be aligned with your business function, aligned with your business process. Remember, I said that you shouldn't be doing anything that gets in the way of, that isn't providing value. So we should be very focused on providing value. So find out what your organization's aims are. Make sure you understand your organization's ethos, the ethics, and things that you want to achieve. And then the AI should support that strategy, should support your existing strategy. So it's thought-provoking and it's aligned with your existing business. The third thing is that it should be scoped. And by this I mean that you should have very clear goals for success. Before you start the project, you should know how the project is going to be successful. How will you know if it's good? Now, the other thing I have here is non-goals. That's a kind of odd word, a non-goal. But what I mean by non-goal is this is what the project must not do. This is what I don't want to happen. Every single business I talk to, I do a lot of work with startups. And I always tell startups this one thing, that the definition of strategy is knowing what you're not going to do. Not knowing what you're going to do, but knowing what you're not going to do. The list of things that you could do is just about infinite. If you're building a software company, you could do anything. If you're building an organization, you could do anything. What really defines your organization is what you don't do. The point that you can say, I'm not going to do that, is the point that you know you've got a strategy. So your project should have goals, but it should also have non-goals that define the outline of it. We're not going to do that. It's so easy to start a project and just keep adding stuff to it. We'll just keep adding more and more and more, and you never finish the project. So it has to be tightly scoped with goals and non-goals, and then we also need to have some measures of success. When you finish the project, how are you going to come back to people and say, that was successful? Well, what makes it successful? What are the measures of success that we have to work with? So goals, non-goals, measure of success, and be clear about what you will not do. That's absolutely, absolutely critical. The other thing is that it should be timely. This is a big question, actually. How long should your first AI project take? I work with quite a lot of analysts who specialize in AI, and there was a conference a few weeks ago in San Francisco, and we were talking about AI projects and what the typical AI project looks like. And last year, people were spending about 3 months on a project. It takes about 3 months to get the data together, to get the team together, to build the project, to test it, and to run it. And you know the problem with an AI project that takes 3 months? By the end of 3 months, all the models have been updated anyway and have been improved. All the work that you've done, ChatGPT, Claude, Llama, all these models are being updated every few weeks. Certainly faster than every 3 months. So you set out to complete a project, and by the time you finish your project, the models are already better anyway, and your project is already out of date. So you need to have a project that you can complete and say, that's interesting, that's successful, that's good, but I've done it in time to show that the measures of success are really valuable. Last year, we were talking about 3 months. This year, we're talking about projects which are 6 weeks. Run a project for 6 weeks, because within 6 weeks' time, there's a very good chance that the models will be better anyway, and your project will need revived again. So that's a very short time frame. And that's the other reason you have to be really tightly scoped, be very, very clear on what the scope of the project is. So a short time frame really is short. Now, you might think this is impossible. How can I do a project in 6 weeks? I know some organizations where it takes 6 weeks to get approval for a new laptop, never mind a new project. And yeah, I see people nodding. I think you probably all work for that kind of organization. I work for myself, and it takes me 6 weeks to get a laptop. But it's actually very important that you should be able to run these projects quickly. This means that you have to be talking to people well in advance, understanding what the potential for the project is, understanding these measures and scope and so on. But once you've done that, then you're in a really good position. The next step of the taster project has to be to select projects which I call evolutionary. Because it's only 6 weeks, this is not going to transform your business in 6 weeks, but it could grow into something. So you want to choose a project which can grow into something bigger if it's successful. With the company manual, for example, we talked to the gardening company, and they really like the company manual and they use it for safety projects. And then they said, well, what else could we put in there? And they started to put all the design documents in. And it turned out that their customers who want a new garden designed or who want a new park designed, they all read magazines like Home and Garden magazine or Architecture Digest or Architectural magazine. And they love reading these magazines. So what the company did was scanned in hundreds of articles from the magazine. And now when they design a garden for the customer, they write a story about the garden using ChatGPT as if the garden was featured in the magazine. And so now, rather than just saying, well, we're going to plant these plants here, and there'll be a couple of trees, and there'll be some grass, they can now tell the story about what it's like to sit under the stars on a summer night, having dinner under the stars in this beautiful garden with the scented flowers and things like that. They start to tell the story. And it sounds like the magazines that the customers love. And so now they've actually produced, in the same GPT, they've now produced not just a company manual, but a company design guide and style guide. So that project went from a safety project to be a design project. And they only took 6 weeks to do that second project as well. So they made it evolutionary, not just a one-off project. And that's really important, because you want to something that's going to grow. And you know if you're doing a short project, you can't do everything that you want to do. So you tightly design it and you scope it out. The question then you have to ask is, if my taster project is successful, what do I do about that? A successful project, where does it go next? The next step then, the last step in the taster project, is that it should be resourced. And what I mean by that is that we should ensure that all the necessary resources are available. You need budget, you need people, and you need people who are committed to this project. Now, when I say you need budget, this need not be very expensive, but sometimes you're going to have to perhaps define special machines for it. You're going to have to say, well, maybe this project is going to need some cloud budget for putting data in the cloud, for storing it. Maybe we need to acquire some special tools to do data quality. Work that out in advance. Also make sure that you have the right people. And that includes, if you're talking to the customers, if you're talking to the gardeners, if you're talking to the drivers, make sure you've got permission and make sure you've got all those people ready to be part of the project so that you can get started on it straight away. And also make sure that you've got commitment for this project from executives. One of the reasons that projects often fail is because executives don't even know they're happening. Executives don't understand what's going on. And with any new technology, but particularly with one like AI, which has very important implications for the future, it's really critical to have your executives on board, lined up, and ready to support you, especially if the project is successful, because then you want them to say yes to the next project and be evolutionary about it. So the taster framework then talks through that process. And I find it very, very valuable for working with my clients on how I want the taster framework to proceed. Projects should be thought-provoking, aligned with your strategy, well-scoped, timely, so you can do them within a 6-week period is what I'm suggesting. evolutionary so that you can build into something else, and well-resourced so that you know you can complete that project in 6 weeks, and you know that you have the buy-in and the executive support for doing it. However, I said at the beginning, there are projects which fail. And projects fail for 3 main reasons. The first is the objectives of the project are unclear. The goals and the non-goals are unclear. That is a very, very common problem. And you can fix that. You fix it by making sure you're doing the AI for a purpose. You have a function. You have a reason for doing this project. It's not just fun. It's not just an experiment. And the other reason that projects fail is that they're not aligned with strategic goals. Oh, that's a very interesting project, so what? Is a really bad answer. It should be, that's a really interesting project, let's do more of it, that makes us better. But if you're not aligned with strategic goals, even if the project is successful, it's unlikely to go anywhere else. So projects fail for this reason, that the objectives are unclear. Get that right first. The second reason projects fail is because resistance. And resistance is a big problem with all AI projects just now, because people are concerned, as I said, and as we've heard many times, people are concerned about where this goes in the future. Will I lose my job? Will my job be affected in some way that I don't want? And so it's really important to include these people from every role that will be affected. The example of the call center, to my mind, is actually really critical. People who work in call centers have a lot of experience. They know all the things that can go wrong. They know all the things that people are likely to ask them. It's often very funny. I was talking to somebody who built an AI for a call center, and they said, you know, as soon as we put the AI up there, people asked all sorts of questions we didn't expect. Some of the questions were inappropriate, but many of the questions were just silly questions, and they're phoning for completely the wrong reason. And people would phone up, and I'll give you an example of that. There was an airline company, Alaska Airlines, that I do a lot of work with, and they built an AI bot. And as soon as people realized they were talking to a bot, they would ask things that they probably wouldn't ask a human being because it sounded stupid, including things like, what is the best road to take to the airport so I can get to the airport on time? And the people, you know, a human being sitting at the end of the phone would say, well, I don't know. I'm sitting in a call center in Bangalore. I don't know the best way to get to the airport. But when you put a bot in there, people will ask that question. And so if you actually ask the human beings, then you start to learn all sorts of things about the project that you wouldn't have known before. So resistance can be fixed by including all the people, all the stakeholders, customers, partners, the most junior employees, especially the most junior employees, because they're actually the ones who are going to be most affected by it. And the more that you include people, interestingly, the more comfortable they become with the technology. Because first of all, they begin to realize what the technology cannot do. They begin to realize why they will not be replaced. As John Eng was saying yesterday, you know, the people won't be replaced by AI, they'll be replaced by other people who know about AI. And so if you actually include people in the project, they learn that. The other reason that projects fail is because they're IT-only projects. They're all about technology and not about the business, and that's a huge problem. You can fix that by ensuring that business context is absolutely central to the conversation that you want to have. That is really the important thing, by ensuring that business context is part of your conversation. Focus on the value to the organization, not just the value of the technology in itself. And that's probably the number one thing that you would want to know about. So take these 3 things into account: unclear objectives, resistance, and IT-only projects. And if you can solve all them, or if you can avoid those problems, you're going to have, I think, a really successful project. I want to wrap up just by reviewing the basics. The first fundamental basic, again, start with the business, not the technology, engage the people, but use the AI-oriented methodology. The taster framework that I suggested is specifically designed for AI projects. You wouldn't do another IT project using that. If you're doing a data quality project, if you're doing a cloud migration project, you're not going to do it in 6 weeks. So this is a methodology which is specifically designed for AI projects. Think of those 3 projects that any company can do: time series data, outliers and anomalies, and using natural language. Any single one of you in this audience can go back to your offices and use those 3 things. With that, I hope I've given you some ideas for your first project. Maybe when we meet again, I'll hear about your successes. You can certainly contact me, donald.farmer@treehivestrategy.com. If you put Knowledge Summit in the title of the email, in the subject line, then I'll make sure it doesn't go to spam, and I'll be very happy to answer questions online if you want to do that. I would love to thank you for your time and attention. It's been great to speak to you all, and I see people taking photographs of me. I'm going to take photographs of you, if you don't mind, just to wrap up, because that is really good. Thank you very much.